This could be your year. Make an old man proud of you. Forget about the tears on the level. See me eye to eye. Stand up like a man.
What's up and welcome to another Mograph Mocast. I'm Dave.
And I'm Matt, and joining us today is the amazing, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Jules Urbach.
Hey everyone, such a pleasure to be here as always.
Yeah.
We got a great show for you today. We're going to nerd out a lot. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all the things for show clips and other gems. Join the Mograph Slack channel and the Discord. Mograph Slack if you want to ask questions and, hang out and nerd out with other people. And if you want to do that in person on your computer, you can hang out in our Discord. We hang out there all day nerding out. Episode 400 is next week. I have no idea what we're doing at all, but it's episode 400. I don't know what to do. So it will just be our last episode. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So make sure you follow some things, and also, this is pretty meta right here. One of the reasons we're able to provide this content is our sponsor, Otoy. Mograph's universal sponsor. You know who they are, the makers of Octane Render, the Render Network. You can render things on Octane, make them pretty, and you can render them quickly on the Render Network. Just go to otoy.com, thank them for helping make the show possible, or you could just thank them right now in the chat because because we're here. Last week we had a poll, and we're going to do a quick follow-up on that. It was which Octane feature are you most excited about? We had 14% say post shader graphs, 14% say new geometry pipeline, 29% said the mixed platform rendering. We're going to talk about all this today. And 43% denoiser AOV nodes. So that's fun. That's fun. And so we don't want to take up too much time with the headlines today, but we have a couple things we're going to talk about real quick. So let's real quick get to headlines. All right. The Punisher. He's got a new challenge out, new 3D community challenge. And this is a pretty good one. I think, maybe I'll participate in it, just for fun. I don't think I could win the prize, though, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. He put this video out. I want you to check out this clip because our friend Scott Unruh, is it Unruh or Unruh? I say Unruh. I'm pretty sure it's Unruh. Anyway, I hear everybody saying his name that way, and then all of a sudden I heard him say his name the other day, and he said it another way, and I felt like an idiot. For pronouncing his name wrong. But Punisher actually called him out on this challenge. Check this out.
And if you've seen him around and thought, oh man, I always wanted to join one of those. Well, now is the time. Scott, I'm looking at you. This is your time. You got this.
Directly called out, which is funny. So this is the Eternal Ascent. Here's the template here. This is the template you're going to use. I've been thinking about, should I attempt this or not? I don't know. We'll see. But there's tons and tons and tons and tons of prizes. That's the thing. All the way from, I believe, 4th and 5th place, all the way up to 1st place. There's tons of 1st place prizes. They got, what do they got? Rococo. What do they got? Rococo coil. They got full performance capture bundle, Smart Suit Pro 2 smart gloves, head rig, Artist Pro 24 drawing display, Max on 1 subscription, Grayscale Gorilla Plus subscription, Django Effects Suite, Rococo Vision subscription, $200 craft gift certificate. No, craft? Caft. Not craft. Yeah. You're not getting the mac and cheese.
You're not getting mac and cheese.
Well, we would eat craft dinners. We just eat more. You get that reference, Matt? Nobody gets that reference. Anyway, The last prize, though, I want you to check out this clip because I think you might know these people. Check this out here.
Like, actually, finally, this is the last first place prize. You're flying out to hang out with me this September at Camp Mograph in Chicago. They're also setting up camp in Australia, too, for those artists on that side of the world. But Camp Mograph is probably the best 3D artist convention of all time, because instead of a loud show floor and flashy lights, you are surrounded by serene, natural beauty. Instead of marketing and salespeople, there's lifelong friendships to be made. And instead of crowded panels, there's intimate workshops led by some of your favorite 3D artists. I might also be teaching some yoga classes. We'll see. We'll see. The camp counselors are saving you a spot, and the very good people at Maxon are flying you out. So it is all expenses paid.
That's going to be fun. And
fun.
Speaking of which, of course, Camp Mograph, Matt, you can cover this here.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited. I don't know if y'all heard last week, but we finally announced the U.S. location, which is going to be just north of Chicago, September 12th through 16th of this year. Super excited about that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to go to campmograph.com to get more information. If you're not already on our mailing list, make sure and sign up there. Also, we still have tickets available for Camp Mograph Australia. That is happening June 27th through 30th in the Brisbane area, and it is going to be a lot of fun. Our first venture outside of the country, so we are super excited about that. Make sure to go to campmograph.com.au for more information on that.
Yep. So that's pretty much it. The last thing I did want to mention, though, was the Frame 1 season finale. Dryzen is taking a little bit of a hiatus finishing this season of Frame 1, and he has done kind of a final episode that covers all the other episodes and like has clips and stuff from it. So make sure you check that out. In fact, here's a little taste of it here.
Hey fellow Mographer, I'm Dryson, and I would love to personally invite you to check out Frame 1, a podcast where I sit down with creative leaders within our industry to hear the journey of their startup story, how they felt, and of course, uncover tips and tricks that they use to find success in their business. If you've ever considered freelancing, or maybe even starting your own studio, you need to check out Frame 1, available on all podcasting platforms, and of course, at frame1show.com.
All right, so if you want to check out that episode, it's available on his channel, or you can just keep watching Mograph TV 24/7. It's coming up next after this show, so you can just keep watching. Turn it on, rip the knob off. That's got it up right there. Yep. So I think we covered all the things as fast as we can because we got a lot of Octane nerding to do. First of all, Jen Van Horn says it's going to drive her nuts, the craft dinner thing. It's the If I Had $1 Million song.
Yeah, there she goes. She got it.
Okay, good. There you go. First of all, congratulations, Jules, on being a new dad.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Joining the crazy world of parenthood.
Yeah. No, it's been 3 months. I love it. It's life changing. But of course, I think everybody that's had a child probably knows that. But for me, it's our first. It's been wonderful. So it's been amazing.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
You can sleep in about 18 years. If you need advice, we do have a parenting channel on our Slack if you need advice. So, you know.
Oh,
yeah.
I might take you up on that.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I can't get the baby to sleep. What do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
awesome.
He's amazing. He's amazing.
How are you doing balancing the work thing with all of that? Is it a challenge?
It is. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I'm the kind of person that 14 years slept in the office, and I still have to do that a couple of times in the last few months for various projects. But I think the balance of the force has been reached. So I kind of think that it's normalized. I at least I can do a lot of work from home, so I can be there with the baby, and my wife's been. May's been incredible. I mean, she's taken up so much of the slack when work is called. But I think it's been okay. It's just been obviously these first few months were probably some of the more challenging ones.
That's
but
for sure.
it's been good. It's been good,
Yeah.
and I've had a great support network. Yeah, honestly, between family and friends and colleagues. So that's made it a lot easier.
That's awesome.
Well, I got a lot of things on my list. We'll probably jump around quite a bit. Some of the stuff I have on here is actually stuff that's already out. There's a few things where I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't even know if it's out because I've just been like head down in some projects, and I was like, is that node even in here yet? I haven't had a chance to try it. So first of all, analytic lights are great, by the way.
Yes.
Thank you.
Loving that. Is it a limit of 8? Is that right? 8 or 4? 4? 8?
It's 8. So we could make it anything, and I think there's a I'm going to nudge maybe up to 16 if it's not already in the works for Octane 2024. But it's some of these things. We're probably going to talk a bunch about Brigade. I want to start by saying 85% of everything I've ever shown in Brigade is inside of Octane today. Analytic lights were one of those Brigade features where I was showing those things where lights would move around and it was instantaneous, and that's where those came from. And that code from those Brigade demos I put into. I had a team, I should say, put it into Octane 2023, and even back in the Brigade, demo days, or back when we were showing the pieces, it was 8. It's a limitation of you can make it more, but it'll slow it down. So I think that we want to kind of tune it and push up to 16. Can go higher, but there was a lot of the things that pushed out. Let's say the last 50% of Brigade were like the analytic lights when we added them in there, as cool as they were in Brigade in isolation. Our goal has been, I don't really want to have Brigade be this totally separate thing. I want it to be so that you can use Octane, and at some point you just have all of the Brigade pieces in your normal workflow, and there isn't this massive switchover. There's massive state. So there's a couple of things that we did where you almost barely see that work, but it was a huge amount. But analytic lights were one of the more visible pieces. The parts that was maybe less visible, I remember there's Dino that who's joined our team now and has been doing a lot of QA and testing and stuff. He was trying standalone, and there's a thing in standalone called real-time mode, which if you turn that on, the viewport goes to 4K 60 frames a second. Now, shading can still be noisy or slow, but the speed is exactly what we were showing in all those Brigade demos back in the day, and it's in there in Octane. And so one of the reasons why it doesn't show up, for example, in the Cinema 4D plugin, is that there needs C40 forces you to go to CPU and then back to GPU. It kills the speed. So we're friends with Maximo. We're working very close with them to fix that issue. The Unreal plugin does have that real-time mode fully supported in the viewport, so it's possible. And I think the last piece, the analytic lights are one of those cool features. The last piece was the temporal denoiser. That's the thing that I think is the piece people are like, well, when that ships that's Brigade. And the reason why we didn't ship that was because in 2023 it was too slow, and I was feeling like that's why we had this closed beta. And then I did have people like Dino and others try it out and give me feedback, and it's like it needs to be super fast. So it's been under 6 to 8 months of optimization. And the hope is that once that speed is up, we can finally release a temporal denoiser this year. And at that point, I think everything you've ever seen, even in the Brigade benchmark we put out, will be in the product, but it'll be spectrally correct. It'll have all these features working, and it won't be this separate thing. I mean, that's kind of the decision I kept going back to, is like, do we really want to have 2 renderers or 2 totally different pipelines, or try to just make Octane have all these features? And I think the latter part has been what we bet on, and I hopefully, for artists in the end, that's what the right decision will be as well for them.
So you said the real-time rendering is already in standalone? It is
in standalone. You got to turn on this lightning bolt flag, and keep the shading fairly simple, but to see the effect. But you will get 4K 60 certainly on a 4090, probably a 3090 as well.
And it's also in Unreal, you said?
It's in all of the plugins. The problem is turning on a real-time mode when you don't have. So real-time mode is one thing that Octane never did. Octane would always store something on the CPU and then copy it over to the window. And real-time mode does it just like a video game, which is what the Brigade quality speed needs, which is everything is rendered on, that you're seeing in the viewport is rendered on one GPU, and it doesn't go back to system memory. It doesn't go into a buffer. It just goes right to the screen. And you need that if you're going to run at 60 frames a second at 4K or even 1080p. And the plugins, not everybody uses standalone. Standalone is like, 10% of our users use it. 90% use a plugin like C4D or Blender and so forth, or Unreal. And in Unreal, we were able to have the source code Unreal. We have similar in Blender. We were able to do that pass through, so you can get that real time mode to run. And I think a lot of motion graphics artists use Octane clearly in Cinema 4D. And we alerted Max onto the issue, and they're working with us on it. We all want to sort of see this happen. And I think when you see that, you'll see one of those big pieces that has been there for probably I think we put the real time mode out there in the end of 22. It's been in Octane 2022, so it's been there for a while. And I expect that once people see that or touch it, and if they want to get a sense of that speed, go to the standalone, open your Orbex, turn on that real time mode flag, and just move the scene around. It does not make the shading faster, but it fully utilizes those ray tracing cores to give you what I consider to be pretty much real time feedback and interactivity. And on the shading side, that's where that temporal denoiser comes in. All the noise that we want reduced, we have one frame to reduce it, right? So there's a lot of stuff out there like Rister and other things that have been introduced to do that. I mean, we have techniques that are similar to that, and that's what Brigade's been using to do the cleanup, in real time. And it works really well, but the problem is it drops the frame rate down to 15 or something, which sounds like it's fine, but then it's like a self-fulfilling curve of at 15 frames a second, the denoiser doesn't work as fast as it should if you have 60, and so it's tuned for that kind of 30 to 60 range. That's why it can't drop below 30. A lot of technical in the weeds things, but that's the explanation for where Brigade is at and where we're going with it. So I figured analytic lights are a part of that. I didn't need to take us off into the weeds.
No, it's great.
So
it's great,
is it going to naturally progress that way, or are you still bringing out a specific kernel for it, or is it just going to just kind of be built in? So the real-time mode is where those things are, is where you'll trigger the most Brigade-like features while still having Octane quality. And if already you try that, even in standalone, you'll see a couple of things change. It'll switch from multi-GPU to one GPU for the moment, because right now we're just tuning it for a single GPU to get that speed up, and then the second GPU will be doing other things that can be fed into it. But those things are coming. It'll be in a real-time mode that is going to be not so much a kernel as a flag. Like you will go from something like, I want to have this thing run faster in real time, and it's just one button, and that's it. And it's already in standalone, and it might already be sort of exposed in the plugins to some degree based on what the plugin devs have done. But it's been kind of useless in anything but the Unreal plugin because, again, we haven't had that direct GPU viewport connection, which we desperately need for this to all work. So that's that's sort of the path. There won't be anything crazier than that. You should be able to use any kernel, including direct lighting, path tracing. Photon mapping is probably not going to work super great in there, but it'll all sort of run with the existing kernels, and you'll have a separate flag. Certain things will change, like if you want to do instantaneous depth of field. It's a post-processing effect, but it works really well. We can even add it now. And people have been playing with some of the new post effects. There's instantaneous fog. It was like people on the list of things. I want fast fog. I want it to be instantaneous, and I want it to work with light. So it does sort of, those things are all in there. They also came out of our Brigade stack, and the plan is just to this year have it all the Brigade pieces, all those things that were separately developed, integrate nicely in a nice continuum inside of Octane proper, regardless of what kernel you're using.
So currently now, if I was to export an Orbex out of Cinema 4D, bring it into standalone, could I try out that?
Real-time mode, yeah.
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 All right.
Nice.
And granted, this doesn't have the temporal denoiser, but it is significantly faster. And I would again make the screen large and test the interactivity. And I thought it was always pretty great, but I mean, I think when Dino joined us and started really looking into these things and asking me questions day by day, right? I was like, well, have you tried this mode? He's like, oh my goodness, most key producers don't see this. They've never seen this thing turn on. And I realized, wow, probably that's the reason why there hasn't been more people talking about it, and that's true. So that sort of pushed me to to really figure out why this wasn't possible in the current Maxon SDK, and I think we're near solving that. So I expect that'll be a really nice boost as well.
Amazing.
Yeah. And all the other post effect stuff, chromatic aberration, the lens flare. Is the optical zoom motion blur in 23, or is that coming out? Is it already in there?
I think it's coming. I think whatever pieces we have in there are not the full piece, so it'll be coming in 2024. We've got two releases just like we did last year for 23. I mean, that'll probably be a bigger one towards the end of the year, but I think 2024.1, we're hoping to wrap it up around, next few months, 3 or 4 months, I think. So I'll see if we can squeeze it in there. But it's there's a lot of stuff going into the universal camera as well that's been nice. We have kernel switching. We've got those brand new AAV system.
Yeah.
which now you can write shaders in, which is like, that's a full compositing tool. If you build a, I mean, obviously the interface that we have within Octane Standalone isn't terrific, but you could build a really impressive compositing system with a renderer with those pieces in there. And some of the plugins, we have a new plugin that's around Octane that probably could leverage that. But I think there's a case for me that you can have a pretty amazing compositing workflow within Octane, with the core that we have. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the post effects shader graphs. So you can use any texture. It says you can use any texture as a layer in an output AOV, right?
Yeah.
Is that so? What is? I guess I'm trying to figure out the use case for me, for that. So, because I don't quite even understand that sentence.
Well, let me put it this way. So if you wanted to apply, you have these textures that are we always say global textures for like 2 years now, right? Where you want to create just a shader and just have that as an AOV. You can then take the cryptomat output and you can mask that in the compositor, and in the viewport and the beauty pass have it all blended together nicely. You can also create shaders that are post effects, that are things that are just meant to be run not in the texture, but if you wanted to run like a blur filter or sharpening filter or something on the actual viewport using a cryptomat pass or using something from the rendering passes, all of that's possible. Yeah, so think of all the plugins you have for things like After Effects or Premiere. Right. I mean, those anything that is now a texture or shader inside of Octane can be used as a almost as a post processing pass as a filter, and that's pretty neat. Without leaving the render, and you can then feed that to the next rendering pass, and so there's a lot you can do there. And from the very earliest days of Octane, people love the post processing, they love the glares, the glints, and all that. Right. This is, I mean, you can make almost anything with that, and build more and more interesting pieces with those elements. I mean, I pushed for that because I was like, I want to have more control. I want to have absolute control over, the color wheel and balance and things like that, more than what we have in our built-in effects. And again, like OSL and those things, I mean, they give you that capability, but having that in the post-processing pipeline and being able to share that also with the rendering pipeline, I think is pretty neat. I'm not sure there's OSL shaders that are in the post-processing pipeline and other renderers. I think ours is maybe one of the earliest ones, but I mean, I miss having that as an artist, and I'm glad that it's there. But just even taking all of the existing nodes that we have and running things through that, I think, I mean, even UV distortion, like you can do 2D like ripples and map that over parts of the 3D.
Oh, okay.
There you have, I mean, any procedural, any shader can be done as a layer in the post-processing side of things, and you can sort of queue that up by taking a 3D model and running a global AV on that, and then feeding that as a layer into the post-processing pass, and then doing some funky stuff with that. There's some really cool effects, probably on us to do more examples, but it's extremely powerful and pretty exciting.
I try to be a purist whenever I'm creating stuff. Like I'm working on something right now. I'm like, my goal in this project right now is to not do anything in After Effects. Just everything is going to be straight out of Octane. That's my
I'm
that's
with
my goal.
you. Like, I mean, and that's our goal too, in the sense that a lot of people really, obviously there's tons of pipelines that are, you just take what's coming out of the render, you do AVs, do your thing in another tool. But I do think that there's a lot to be said for a whole group of artists, and I'm one of them, who wants to do it all in Octane. And I think that technically there's a lot we can be doing now with those 2024 post-processing AOV features and shaders, and that's kind of my goal, is that we get there, and maybe along the way build things that are really tough to do in After Effects. And remember, we still have control of the rendering buffer directly. It's spectral. It can be, that quality could be carried over into post. So there's some exciting possibilities there too. So
let's talk about the Mac side of things a little bit. I'm saving the headset stuff for the end. But I know this is gonna be hard not to talk about. But as far as CUDA in Metal, I have a question from somebody online who's sent in. If I could find it real quick. It's regarding Octane on Apple devices using Intel processors, and where are you going as far as support on Intel processors coming up? Because there's changes, of course, going on at Apple. So, this person was wondering, are you stopping support for Intel on like Mac OS 13?
Yeah, so I think we do. I mean, to start with, I mean, obviously we look to Apple to figure out where to focus our efforts on, and it's no secret. I mean, it's been a couple. We've been working with their engineering teams for like 13 years. I mean, it's a really close relationship, partnership on the engineering side. And I think that when we were back in 2020 when we announced Octane X, I mean, there wasn't really Apple Silicon, so everything we were doing was about getting Octane at that point, Octane 2020, the equivalent, running on Intel. I mean, and it did run. It ran on Intel GPUs, AMD GPUs, and yes, the M1 when it came out. But since then, I mean, as we've had other features, we're now on Octane 2024. It's been, I'm just going to say that it's so difficult to take any features beyond what we had in Octane 2020 and bring them both to Apple Silicon and at the same time have no compromises on Intel, older Intel Macs. It's something where it's like we've certainly taken Octane X 2020. I think it works on Mac OS 13. I mean, there may be some issues, and I have to look into that, but it's definitely not something we can keep supporting going into the future because Apple themselves they don't sell any Intel Macs anymore. It's not a product that even exists currently, and even they have features that just don't work on on later things. You can't develop I think things for the headset right on Intel Macs, some stuff like that where. You imagine on the developer side with APIs, like we've asked them and pushed them for specific APIs in Metal so we can make Octane to work, and there's a limit to that on older Macs. Some of those APIs just don't work the same, and that's the reason why that we just can't bring like the latest Octane to the older Intel Macs, and even on the operating system side of things, there's some issues there. That doesn't mean that if like there is like a huge number of users, and I may not be aware of them, that are looking for the Octane X 2020 to work on a later Mac OS. Send me at info@otoy.com that email. I just want to look into it to make sure. But my understanding is we've taken it as far as we can, and resource-wise, it's already a lot of work to take to full parity with all the things we're doing on 2024. Obviously, Apple now has ray tracing hardware, huge leap. Which we're in the midst of fully that we support it, but I want to make sure it's like absolutely as as performant as it is on NVIDIA and CUDA and RTX. Our focus is really just on those two for now, but that's the answer, is that it's been really difficult to support Intel Macs. The tools, the APIs, the things that we depend on that are there on Apple Silicon that work fine on Apple Silicon just don't work the same on those older pieces of hardware.
And they work great on Apple Silicon.
Yeah,
my Mac Studio is a hoss. It is a machine. Like it is my most stable machine that I have, even working, and especially now with the cross compatibility between Mac and PC, as I was telling you earlier. Like my Mac is my main machine, and it's so small. It's just tiny. It's just tiny right here. It can work with every other computer in my house now. Now I just got to throw PC nodes at it, just over and over again.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we spent a lot of time. For example, we rebuilt both the PC version and the Mac version of Octane, so they could both talk to the same and have network rendering. And so that's an example where it's like if we had to do it a third or fourth time on Intel and AMD GPUs, that would have been tough. They're different, but yeah, I mean with the latest version now, you are able to hook up 54090s to your Mac Studio and have that extra rendering power on your Mac Studio, which is pretty cool. And there's things like that I think make the Mac a lot more viable and interesting. But even on a single GPU on an M2 Ultra or an M3 Max, which I have now on my MacBook Pro sitting next to me, I mean the performance is pretty great. And I don't think Apple's done. I think the force of how they need to get these chips to like 2 nanometers or 3 nanometers for the next iPhone has just pushed them to this really good power envelope. And there's something unique. I mean, this thing has, my Mac has 128 gigs of VRAM. My MacBook Pro. I mean, I don't think you can find a video card with more than 48. So I'm just saying. There are things like they have. It's interesting, and I do think that I'm very happy we invested in getting Octane X working so well on the Mac. I mean, there's still issues. It's still a very different system than NVIDIA, but supporting NVIDIA on PC and on the high end on the cloud, plus doing it on the Mac, plus having those being able to talk to each other, feels like it's the right application of resources, developer time and effort for what artists need. And there's more. I mean, we do have an AMD version of Octane for PC. It's just not very performant and a lot of issues there. So we've held that back a bit, and it's not been like a huge issue on our users. So I think in terms of just moving as fast as we can, especially given again there are things like Brigade, things I want to get out the door. Having sort of the focus on the Apple silicon side of things and on the PC NVIDIA. I mean Linux obviously also works fine with NVIDIA. Those are our areas of deep focus right now on the core of Octane.
You gave us a stat on something before the show, the iPhone equivalent.
Yes. So iPhone 15 Max Pro has it is, and that's a ray tracing hardware in there, by the way. Without even using that Octane, we have an Octane for iPhone app. We haven't released it, just the iPad version's out. But that thing runs as fast as the M1. I mean, if you load this same resolution viewport buffer, probably faster in activity. And that's a 3-year lag time, right? Between the M1 was all you could get when Apple Silicon was announced. I think it was the M1 MacBook Air. This thing's faster than that. The iPhone 15 Max Pro is faster, and it's also about the same speed as the iPad Pro, the M1 iPad Pro. So what's interesting is you give Apple 3 years. The M3 that's now out there, that's top of the line. I expect within 3 or 4 years you have an iPhone that's as fast as that. And that's kind of crazy, but also as we get to look at things like the Apple, headset and spatial computer, you can imagine having a lot of power in your pocket that rivals what you'd have to carry in a laptop or certainly a desktop. It's getting crazy, and I have to give kudos to Apple for putting that much power in a phone chip. I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. And we haven't seen the M3 Ultra yet, so obviously the M3 Max is But so I'm waiting for more.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the M3 Ultra before I upgrade, because right now I'm on the Mac Studio M1 Ultra, so I can't wait to see what that looks like.
I mean, I'm hoping it's doubling the speed. It's weird. I get everything Apple, but I did deliberately skip from the M1 Max MacBook Pro to the M3 Max, and it was doubling the speed easily. And I think that I expect that there'll be an iPad at some point with an M3 in there, which will also be double the speed. But it's Apple's done some great work, and it's unique. I mean, there isn't really any other usable platform out there that has system memory and video memory all in one chip. I mean, there are limits to, obviously you can't put 4 GPUs, and you can't put 2 GPUs in any Apple device at this point, right? But you can link them to an external Apple box or an external PC box, which we solved with network rendering. So I feel like that's at least sort of provided a tool for artists on the Mac to have more power.
Absolutely.
They need it.
Yeah. And it's so easy to do the network stuff. It's so easy.
Is headless rendering still on the agenda?
It is. It is on the agenda, and we've had it working for a while now. It's just more issues with user friction and things like that we need to figure out. So headless rendering works. It's been working for about 10 years. If you load up the Blender plugin, you'll notice there's something called Octane Server that comes separately from the way Blender works. And by the way, I love the Blender guys. I mean, Ton and I have gotten to become really close friends. I spoke at the Blender conference. I'm keynoting the Blender conference in April in LA.
That's awesome.
I think it's a huge market. I mean, millions of Blender users, and Octane's free for Blender, so it's not like for one GPU, which is now 49, it's like 8 GPUs from the past. So it's really something where I Blender has. But the GPL is an issue there. It forces us to have a server that you run Octane on, and then Blender can talk to it. And we've just gotten open source, Blender with an add-on only to talk to that server. But here's the interesting part: that server can also talk to Octane standalone, to all the plugins, which means that none of the rendering is done inside Cinema 4D or an Octane standalone or an Unreal. It's done on that same exact server that Blender is using. That is working. We just have to put the pieces into the plugins to enable that. And it's more just like, in Blender, it's been there for a while. It's like it's battle tested. In our other plugins, it's not. So it's in closed beta, but it's fully headless. You can, just like with Blender, where there's no Octane's running inside of Blender, no Octane's running in C40 other than the plugin sending messages. But it's the same exact messaging system that we use to send it to Blender. And now, since Octane 2023 and 2024 now, that Octane server that you get for Blender will be the same one used for headless rendering in all the plugins. And there's crazy things. You can send 3 different DCCs to that server, and you can kind of share your scene. I've been showing that in our GCC talks for a while. It's been working for a while. But again, my experience with releasing software is that when you release something and it's like not fully polished, artists will get more mad than they'll be happy. So, I just want it to work really perfectly, and there's still some issues. It's still a bit flaky, but it's there. So headless rendering is more than just like a roadmap feature. It's there. We just have to figure out how to release those pieces into each of the plugins, and that's it. I mean, at that point, then you'll be able to leverage the Octane server element the same way it works in Blender. And you might notice that if Octane does crash and the server Blender doesn't crash, you can reboot it, right? So it'll be the same in all the different plugins.
That works the same way on my Mac as well. Like, I find I don't have to shut down C4D. If it crashes for me, I just restart the render and it starts working again.
Oh, that's just bug fixing. That's not headless rendering. We just I think improved the stability of it. But there's even a greater islet of stability, if you want to call it that, when you have it as a separate process. But the other thing that's interesting is you could then have the Octane server. We haven't allowed this officially, but you can put it on another machine entirely, have 0 GPUs, and just run it on a whole different machine. It's probably not fully necessary, especially since I think most machines, even a Mac, right, have a pretty powerful GPU at the right on device. But it is something where if you don't have enough memory or you want to run something that it could work that way too.
So 2024, let's talk about the 2024 features. You got the alphas out. You can even get it on on Cinema 4D right now. There's a version to play with. I downloaded it, but I'm waiting to finish a project before I move over and try these alpha features here. But
I've been working in it, and you're not supposed to. It says do not use for production, and I've just been straight up using it.
Well, let me say, most of the features we've just been talking about, including the post-processing things, the Mac PC network rendering, that's in 2024. That is not a 2023 feature. It is in the beta. So, just to talk, and those are great features, and glad they work. I mean, we're not releasing stuff that is like super alpha, but it is definitely beta. But we're hoping that the idea with 2024 is it wraps up first half of this year, and we have a second release before the end of the year, and maybe some interims in between with bug fixing and other elements. And there are things where there are 2 features that are really exciting. I mean, I've been showing meshlets for a while, right? Meshlets is where you have everything on disk. Yeah, and obviously it's like it works in its own little isolated piece or in test builds of Octane. Putting it into production has always been a challenge, and we're doing it in 2 phases. And I think the first phase is much closer to release, which is there are 2 things you can stream in from the disk: textures and meshes. Texture streaming is, I think, much further along, and my hope is that gets out. I hope as it gets out in the first 2024 release or shortly thereafter, so that you have just unlimited textures on disk, and it just gets pulled in as it needs to as you're moving through the scene.
Nice.
And the geometry portion is the same way. It works just like Nanite in Unreal. I mean, except it's in Octane. That was the goal of the feature. It's, again, like many things, developing these things, getting it to a place where it's stable. It works just as well in every scenario for artists. That last 5% is probably the last year of work on it. But they're getting there, and those are high priorities on the 2024 future feature roadmap. But there's tons in the current release. I mean, anybody could just download and play around with the features now, and as Matt's been doing, and maybe even do some work with it. But not recommended. But it's definitely it's if you so choose, you can take the risk. Those features are there in people's hands, and I think that there's definitely a lot more that we could be doing with, I want to also be focused on different kinds of displacement mapping. I mean, we do have 2 kinds. We've got the vertex one, which is purely mesh-based, texture displacement, which is texture-based. And there's always been this goal of doing something in between that has the best of both. That's still, something we're focused and we're working on. But yeah, I mean, I think that, we covered a bunch of the good, headline features in 2024 with the post-processing stack, Mac PC, sharing, and there's a lot more. I mean, obviously, there's like pages of new and improved features, lots of new nodes. We're also pretty far along. I don't know how much this matters to people out there that are not don't care about standards so much, but we are doubling down on USD support, and we're doubling down on Material X support. There's an entire team developing Material X. Everything Material X will be supported, and same thing with USD. I mean, even in OrbX file, OrbX is just a lightweight wrapper around formats that that are open source, like a Leanbic or FBX USD, but we're trying to move it so that everything in OrbX is effectively a USD file with extensions that have been in OrbX or ITMF. And I think that'll be nice, because then you'll be able to open OrbX and like Reality Composer for Apple, that Apple makes, and edit things and then push that out to the Vision Pro. And there's a lot of stuff that's useful in USD. And we joined the USD standards organization, Material X, same thing. We're going to try to make it so that whatever's missing in those specs that Octane has, for example, that I think are useful, those go in there, and I think open standards really help. I mean, we've been working with the Arnold guys and the Redshift team for a while on trying to standardize on things. That's why we picked Standard Surface. It was a suggestion from the Arnold team, and Redshifts had something similar. I do too. I mean, it's and there's a new one. So we talked to the Adobe guys. Adobe used to, be Big Eye Pixar. I mean, they're driving it Standard Surface 2.0, which we're of course adopting, and that'll be pretty close, I think, to something that'll work really well in most renderers right off the bat. And I would also like to make sure that if we do add custom things, for Octane, that it's something that other renderers could at least adopt. Vectron's been in Octane since 2018. It's a long time now. And I've been trying to get that to be it's written in OSL, these procedural shapes, these fractals we can create. It'd be great to have that standardized in OSL so that other renderers, however they implement them, right? I mean, we do it our way on the GPU, could leverage those same shaders.
I'm excited about the streaming of textures and meshlets strictly for my network because, I don't have the money to change my infrastructure over to 10G here at the office, and so I only have 1 gig network, and it's 99% of the time it's fine. But when I get overzealous and I start adding 8K textures to everything, it's like all of a sudden I'm transferring 20 gig of data over to my nodes. So I imagine that's going to be incredible.
Yeah. Well, I think in some of the videos we put out showing the meshlets, it's showing the bandwidth from disk into GPU memory, right? Because it's continuous, like it's always pulling stuff out. So I'm pretty sure that it was. I mean, we were even running it over the internet. Like we tried it over just regular. Like, what if we put put all the data instead of being a hard drive that's local? And granted, you probably want that if you're doing it super fast real time. Yeah. But it was running over. I mean, my phone gets I've got 1 gig Spectrum internet here at the house, and that will get me 300 megabits. And I think it was about 300 megabits a second was a stream that we were getting into the GPU. When it was pulling things over them, not bad. I mean, I don't think that's going to be the case in all situations, but it's definitely something where if you have tons of displacement or you want to render a planet or all the stuff Nanite's been good for, that kind of stuff will be great, and we want to make it so that it's pretty easy in the R pipeline to sort of check an object or texture and have it be suitable for effectively being streamed in.
Last 2024 thing I want to hit the Octane GPT stuff.
Oh yeah. So I think it's pretty cool. We fed it so we went to it's using OpenAI GPT-4, and we fed it everything that we could about Octane, and it's we use the GPT API, and it gives you a little, instead of having go to the website documentation, you just ask it a question. And we've also been working to train it on code, so it can generate Lua scripts for you, OSL shaders. Eventually basically creating pieces of the node graph. And I think that's kind of where, I look at AI as being split into separate things. LLMs, right, large language models, where you can speak to it and you can give it prompts to do something. Rather than just spitting out some weird AI image, which I think is what a lot of people are doing with it now, it'd be great if it could actually if you could sort of art direct it to fill in something or have a complex thing that requires a tutorial to understand, like try different things out. So having it understand the Octane C graph, the node graph, and those elements, I think is really cool. But for right now, it just saves you a lot of tech support. You can ask it specific questions. The example I posted which was me asking Octane GPT those queries was actually pretty useful. It's like a lot of the power, the first order of value, I think, of AI is that if you have a lot of support documentation and you want to have an agent that's there on demand to be able to give you those responses, it works. And in our case, we trained it specifically on shader code, on corner cases. We have 13 years of data and user tickets and all these things to start with, and we can always keep adding more. So it'll be a service that comes pretty much free with your Octane, certainly your Octane sub. We're going to try to make it free for everyone so that it can just be used, if you're using Octane for free in Blender or, on the iPad app, for example. But the fact that it can write code and the fact that it can generate nodes is pretty cool. So that's where I see more interesting things coming. If, instead of just telling you what to do, it can maybe sometimes implement some of those things. And I like that. I think that in texture generation is pretty powerful. I've got to know Ahmad from Stability AI, who is a very big fan of our stuff, and everything we're doing. pretty well, and the runway guys as well. And there's some, I mean, there's a lot of angst over AI. We could get into that as well. But to be honest, there's some great tools that could be added to our existing workflows that I think we should all be leveraging. And that's my goal, is just get those in place and make everything that's already there that you use even better. And there's a whole debate over whether you'll have neural rendering for everything, or whether you're going to have ray tracing and neural rendering, or you know, it's there's a debate over that, which I have my own thoughts on. That's a whole other conversation we can get into. But I'll let you guys lead.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about the OSL thing, in GPT, is like, I've tried this just with regular Chat GPT, and it's been fairly successful at writing me OSL to do certain things. So like being trained specifically in that is going to be great. I'm looking forward to where that's going, because how many times have you been working on a project and you're like, I just need a texture for this thing in the background, and then you got to go searching for it and everything. Imagine you could ask something to fill it in for you, or all those quality of life things that'll make it easier for us to work fast. That's what I like.
I agree. Render, actually, big news there. We can talk about that in a bit too. Moved to Salana. I've been talking at the Salana Breakpoint conferences for years, every year, except this year because my child was born right as I was supposed to go up on stage. But I remember in 22 at the Salana conference, I showed how I would imagine all the AI stuff could be used inside of Octane, right, or inside of any 3D tool, even just with Stable Diffusion and things like that. And of course, this texture generation. I mean, the latest Stable Diffusion stuff is really good also at doing 360s. So if you want an HDRI that's generated, you can do that really well. Depth estimation is really good. And also, if you're doing any sort of compositing, right, or even that, with the Wonder Dynamics app does, which I had spoken to those guys, they're great. I mean, if you just want to remove something from video, drop something in that's rendered, I mean, AI tools for that kind of stuff are really important. And by the way, one of the reasons why I invested in doing all these post-processing shaders in Octane is I think the post-processing pipeline is also where you can have neural renders come in and do things like, here, take a video track and remove this hole or add something to it, or do a depth extrusion and all that stuff. I think, you can also turn that into, we can talk about NERFs and the stuff, great work Luma is doing around and Gaussian spots and all that. Those 3D models aren't great. I mean, neural generation of 3D models is not quite there yet. It might very well get there someday, but to me, it feels like doing textures, doing scatter nodes, doing even node graph stuff that can be filled in by AI could be really useful. I think when it comes to just doing full scene 3D, we'll see. I mean, that's to do that from whole cloth, you need to generate models, and everything that I've seen so far, some models look okay, but they're not at the quality of even what a junior 3D modeler could do, and so there's work to be done there. But I do think that in terms of filling in repetitive tasks or things that are they're kind of like, in PowerPoint back before there was AI, right? You could just hit a thing and it would give you different designs and stuff, and seeing those, generated for you using the tools we have, like scatter and all these things, and just to explore combinations could be interesting, could be a good tool. But doing, texture generation and things like that could be really nice as well. And my other, effort at Otoy is on faces, right? We've been doing light stage digital doubles, not so much we have those faces now available for all Octane subscribers, but we've been doing it for the, visual effects industry, John Knoll and ILM and those guys for all the digital doubles. And it's to the point now where you take a light stage scan and you can take a model of somebody doing a performance live almost on on their video feed and drive that. Some of the Star Trek stuff we're doing showed a little bit of that with digital makeup. It's very powerful. It's way beyond anything deepfake. I mean, you can generate 3D models of hair and faces, and the machine learning aspect of it that allows you to animate characters or animate faces with it is super powerful. And I think, again, it requires a human artist to do something interesting with it. It's not hitting a button or a prompt and generating something. It's a great tool. So I want to roll those out this year as well. And probably around the time of GTC, I'll be showing some of the facial AI stuff that we've been doing in greater detail. I think there'll be more I can share by then, and that's coming up in end of March.
Yeah, speaking of light stage, someone was asking in the chat if you can speak on the 2024 plans for light stage.
Well, that's a big part of it. What I was describing, we scanned in hundreds of people, and we've also been very careful. I mean, I'm a big believer in digital rights for actors. I mean, so even before all the SAG stuff blew up, everyone that was part of that got compensated. We have a compensation plan for them if their stuff gets used in ways that are outside of the more simple license we provide in the for Octane. But the data set, the richness of that data set is enough for us. I mean, even with 64 different human samples or human scans that we have for people's faces and their expressions, you can do a lot of things from de-aging and all those things. And it's a little bit like the Adobe stock thing where everything that goes into the training is accounted for. It's commercially viable. Like, I want to provide that. And the tools that will come around for LightStage will be being able to generate a realistic 3D head, like what MetaHumans does, but at a higher quality. And also things like de-aging. I mean, there are things that are just without any sort of, source or target. You could just de-age yourself. You can age yourself. You can put makeup that's physically scanned or taken from a photo on you. Those are things that are just really useful for productions. And also just fun to play with. And the quality that we're getting at, we pushed the envelope to rendering at 4K, at 6K, mixing that with Octane, it's pretty great. And it's still early. I haven't really shown too much of that, but I will definitely have more to show in the next month or two. And I think that'll all be under the LightStage banner. So in addition to getting these beautiful scans, you'll be able to do things with them, animate them, and even have a set of tools that allow you to sort of do that with arbitrary data. And again, I mean, we'll be anything that allows you to do that with arbitrary data. We want to be extremely careful with that because, again, I am terrified of the whole deepfake phenomenon, and I wouldn't want to be participating in something that provides an even more powerful tool than that gives you a full 3D, perfect quality thing. But there are guardrails around that. That's one of the reasons why we also, by the way, haven't released too much of that. I want to make sure that it's really safe to use, safe to implement.
Yeah. A lot of questions today. A lot of people talking about anime kernel in the chat.
Oh yes, yeah, and that is something that we had a function that was in Octane 2023 that allowed you to load a render delegate, and we built the anime kernel as the render delegate, and it never made it out of closed beta testing because it had stability issues. So that's something that to be honest, probably the best thing for us to do is to take that anime kernel render delegate and just put it in the core of Octane. And there's that one missing piece, right? We have all the other elements in Octane. It's just the edges, right? The edge rendering is the only thing that's in that kernel. That's definitely a priority for this year. And I apologize that it wasn't out there sooner. We just, some of these things that get announced and they get far along, get sort of built in a certain way. And doing a render delegate and then depending on the render delegate system being loaded back in Octane was probably too much. So we're reworking that. And again, it was stability more than anything else. And we had a lot of cool stuff in the render delegate system, but it actually caused more problems than it solved. So we have other solutions for that. But yeah, anime kernel, edge rendering, I would expect it by the end of this year. By let's call it November this year, I would hopefully have that in Octane 2024.
All right, before we get to the headset stuff, which is going to be awesome, real quick, I know some other people are asking about the render on Salana transition. And some people have heard about this, some people haven't, so maybe we kind of start from the beginning real quick and just talk about that transition.
Well, I'll start by probably some of the biggest news that people may not realize is I think many years as we were building Render, I mean, Render was effectively wasn't that disparate from Otoy. And right now we split them into two really separate entities. So there's the Render Foundation. It has its own team. I'm not even on it, by the way. I mean, I'm the founder of the Render Network. I have a ton of input into it, but it runs itself. And more importantly, it has community proposals. So you can vote on where the Render Network goes. And granted, obviously Otoy has a big say in that, but I kind of just decided to let the votes play out. And so two things were voted on. One of them was, do we move to Salana, and do we, just frankly, Ethereum is, anyone that's used Render knows Ethereum gas fees, and we tried even Polygon or Matic. It's not great. It's just slow. And the things, I don't want to give up on the blockchain part of it. I don't want to give up on that piece. I think the entire value of this, the fact that everything is on chain, the fact that every render is on chain, the fact that we're talking about provenance and how you prove something was generated in one way or other, valuable, right? So Solana, came into sort of my radar a few years back. So I started speaking at those conferences. And I wanted to make sure that if we were to move to it, it was something that we really thought through. So we took a vote on it, and the community pretty much overwhelmingly voted to move to Salana. At the same time, change the model, which is probably too deep for this conversation. This is what they call burn mint equilibrium, so that the more volumes on the network, the more everybody makes. It's a more complex payout system, but it works better, and I think that it's going to end up being a much better system. So the Salana move, we've transitioned to that. We're working on the new payout model, BME, and it's been a success. I mean, I think that we've I just spoke to some Coinbase conference, and Coinbase is now listing the Salana version of Render, which is great. And I think this transaction times on Salana are so much faster. Toli and Rajvine, who created Salana, and I know them really well, are such solid people, and they went through their ups and downs too. I mean, Salana was in a bad place a year ago, not through their own fault, but because of a lot of the FTX stuff. I mean, FTX and Salana were connected in various ways that were nothing to do with Toli and Raj, and they've gone through that. And I think that now that we're on it and the transaction times are so high, even digital goods, and I hate to call them NFTs, because if you want to sell something, you want to sell your art. Honestly, the Salana guys are great about taking ideas for the open source stuff that we're doing, 3D stuff, tickets that you can sell. I mean, all these ideas that we have, they're willing to implement them, and the transaction speed is super high. And Salana, I think, has been up. I mean, it's had a 1-year uptime now without any issues, and it's not even fully out of the beta phase yet, and it's doing fine. So I think it's been a solid move for us, and it definitely, from my perspective, was the healthiest way of supporting Render in the long term. But ultimately, I'm also proud of the fact that it was voted on by the community and that we have that process in place. And to that end, there have been a lot of votes, right? AI on the Render network has always been a thing that I've been interested in. I think the second Stable Diffusion is ready. I threw it on the Render network, and you could run it from within, the same website you can do render jobs on. But the more interesting thing is being able to allow any type of AI job. And we've had about, I think, 6 to 8 proposals, of which we've approved, I think, probably 5 or 6 of them to date, of different types of models that can be run on the Render network. There's a lot of GPUs. And I think that continuum of being able to add as many different types of AI workloads that people can come up with that fit. I mean, it should also be something that sort of fits within the model we have. But so far, it's been pretty wild. We have 6 different types of AI providers. That's great. It's great for the network itself and for artists. Obviously, from the Otoy side of things, and from my perspective, with my OctaneRender, I want to make sure we have, best of class AI tools that are running on the system for, everything from denoising to texture generation and the like. But that's a lot. So I will pause there. But that is my update on Salana and Render, in a nutshell.
Cool. If anybody has any more specific questions, put it in the chat. Maybe we'll try and swing back around to it. Do you have your Vision Pro?
I never leave home without it.
I've been seeing.
It's an amazing device.
Did you see the clip of there's a guy on TikTok driving his Tesla on autopilot? Oh my goodness.
Here's the thing. That's obviously not a good idea, but the pass-through is really good. It is really good, and other than the thing running out of batteries, which case it goes black, in which case you can't see at all, which would be bad. Yeah. Listen, I've been obviously, we released an app we can talk about that day and date with this thing launching. So before that app was released, obviously I spent a significant time developing that and spent time on the glasses in various ways, right, pre-release. And I remember thinking, this thing is something you can use in everyday life. Now that I have one, my personal, Vision Pro, I've used it plenty. I can do things around the house. I can do things around the office. It does give you incredible pass-through. It doesn't necessarily work great in low light, but you're going to find people doing crazy things with them. But I'm not shocked that somebody tried driving with it. I remember thinking when I put it on, I wonder if I could drive with this safely. And I realized that probably not. Probably doesn't. God help you if the thing runs out of power or something happens and it goes black while you're, because that's really the problem. That's why it's unsafe. But if it were, if you could continuously see things with it and you were in daytime, right? It does work well, but that's the problem. Low light doesn't work well. The power can go out to it. It's not meant yet for everyday use, and that's just. But we're seeing people do crazy things. I'm not shocked about the driving thing. We'll see what else people will do with it in probably the coming days and weeks as people get crazy ideas.
And you said you've been watching movies on the ceiling.
Yes. So I think that one of the things that I like about it, it's a great movie experience. It's a great TV experience. It's obviously, if you've ever gone to see a 3D movie, if you care about that, like Avatar is an example of probably a 3D movie done right. 3D in the glasses looks amazing. You don't have to worry about the light being sort of blocked by the polarizers or active shutter lenses. Yeah. You get a beautiful 3D experience. More importantly, I have a pretty big, one of those laser projectors, short throw laser projectors, gives me 130 inches or whatever. And I put the Vision Pro thing in front of that, and it's even bigger and it's even brighter. And I'm like, well, this is, and the darks are perfect, right? So it's like if you love movies, that's great. But then I was like, I'm taking care of my baby, and I'm watching him through the glasses, and I can look up at the ceiling, and I've seen other, I have a friend who writes reports, Ansel, who also has his child on him while he's watching movies in the show. I'm not the first to try that, but you look up at the ceiling, and it's this very comfortable experience of watching in a giant IMAX size screen in the sky. And you think that it's weird because you haven't really been able to try that until you get this device, but that is one modality that I was impressed with. I was like, this is a comfortable way of watching TV and films. And I watched half a season of Reacher on it, and it was great, And then I went downstairs, A/B tested it on my giant, projector. It was nowhere near the quality, and I had to go to where the TV or the projector is, where it's like, this thing can be anywhere. The one thing I will say is that it's not the lightest device in the world. At some point, you're on this thing for 2 hours. You feel it on your eyes, But
yeah, sure.
It will get lighter, and it's also something that you just have to figure out how to use it. I mean, when the iPhone and the iPad first came out, they weren't perfect. They didn't have all these things ironed out. Or the watch, even, for that matter, And I think this is the first very, 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 very first generation device of an entirely new platform. I'm so bullish on the future of this thing. I think that it's the future for a lot of different types of use cases, and I don't think a company like Apple would have bet on it if they didn't believe that. The problem is, I think people look at it right now, and the thing is heavy and it's bulky and all these things. Right. I mean, relative to a pair of sunglasses, but it will change. And the one thing they did right is they threw everything into this thing. So from the operating system perspective, imagine you have it in contact lenses, it'll still be Vision OS, right? And the apps will probably still work the same way. It's just you don't have to imagine not the operating system or the device or you have to worry about the size. And that's where I think the interesting part from here onwards out is the size can be shrunk. That's a hardware issue. And my other thing is, this is a great way for us to test holographic content, because you put that device on, our light field stuff, things we've been showing for 10 years, right? That was never quite worked on the Oculus, because it wasn't designed for that. When we put out our Vision Prep, which was all about the Star Trek archive work that we've been doing for years, there is you can download new assets, and one of the first downloadable assets was you go to this Enterprise bridge for Discovery Season 2, and there's a cubic light field that's rendered in Octane. All the reflections, all the things are in there in that cube. If you go inside of it or you look around it, and that's the kind of stuff that I was excited for Octane users, because there's so many Octane users that came to us. They said, "Oh, I've got a development version of the Vision Pro. What's the format to render to it?" Or David Area, with all the beautiful things he's doing in 360, there is a format that we now can support. Of course, you have the spatial videos from Apple, but you can also generate 24K stereo cube maps. You can generate, these giant 16K by 16K, video orbits. And then the last piece is you can have a volume of light that is baked into a cube and spit out into a file that the Vision Pro can load, and we'll have an SDK for that, so you can drop it in other apps. And that is the same type of data we would feed into a light field display panel and have in the past. And in that case, you won't need any glasses for that, right? That's something that can run, especially in the same way. So it's a great step towards the holodeck. That's my, that's my sort of summary of the the Vision Pro's promise, and in the midst of the continuum of where we want to go.
Needs to give you baby stats and stuff, like bottle 20%, diaper 100%.
I haven't tried it. Yeah, I mean, it can do a lot of it. I mean, obviously the thing with AR is that it can give you instructions overlaid on things in the real world. But I'd say that we're still in the early days of apps, right? I mean, I think we'll see. There's 600 apps, I guess, one of which is ours. But and there's a million iPad apps, which are. I mean, iPad apps work fine, but you want to natively develop that for a device like this. That's the way to take advantage of it.
Yeah, once they get smaller, more compact. I mean, you see people. There's another clip of a guy. He was courtside at a Lakers game or some basketball game, and he's doing that. and it's funny because right now everybody's making fun, right? But just think about the same thing that happened with the iPhone, whenever that was. When was that now?
2007.
2007.
Yeah.
So.
So
maybe, 15 years ago or so? Is that right? What year is it?
Something like that.
So, when people were on their phones, that was a deal. People, you're at dinner with your phone out? That's unheard of. But now everybody does it, right? Everybody's just on their phones all the time. It becomes a normal thing. So these are going to get lighter. They're going to be more mainstream. It's going to be, it's not going to be as weird, I think, in 20 years to see people walking around, putting their hands up in the air and pinching and zooming things, you know. So
Yeah.
It
used to be that if you're talking to yourself on the street, and we always have these now, that they'd send you into the asylum, right? So it's like there's, but I think the glasses, I mean, these devices not meant to be really worn outside of the office or home at this point.
Right.
But that'll change. And I was saying even before the show started to you guys that the fact that you have an iPhone that has an M3 in it, you know, the equivalent of that, or it seems to be an M1. I mean, if you already have a phone, I could totally imagine a version. Maybe it's not the Pro version of the Apple Vision device, right? But a version that maybe could be powered by a phone that could still have the minimum amount of glasses on your face. There's stuff like that I think could really make, you know, a big difference. But it is exciting to be able to play in that world and have a device of this caliber and this quality that we can use to really flesh out and test some ideas for, I will call this spatial computing. For me, it's just, you know, one step closer to the holodeck is how I really interpret the the step function.
And yeah, let's talk about the spatial experience a little bit. I think Casey in the chat said I showed my 10-year-old the Enterprise this weekend on Vision Pro. So it's a spatial experience. It's between Paramount and Roddenberry and Otoy, right? That's the
previously everything that we've been doing with these archives, and there's not just the Roddenberry archive we've been working on, a Beeple archive, Alex Ross archive, there's other things. The Star Trek one, the Roddenberry one just has years of work. There's an incredible team that's working on it, and it's been non-commercial and still is. But in this case, when we were putting out something that was designed for the Vision Pro, we brought in Paramount, and they added more stuff. Like we can now access pretty much everything in the continuum of both what's in the Roddenberry vault and even in what Paramount has. And there will be tickets. Like you'll be able, right now everything's free. You can try it all out. And then at some point, because by the way, some of that stuff is streamed from the render network. We have basically GPUs in the cloud that will render this live and bring it to you in a viewport. Same thing on the web. But the other parts of it are just downloadable spatial experiences. Some of those things are 3D models that are running in Reality Kit. That's the only way that you can render on the Vision Pro is not with your own renderer, not with Unity. Really, it's like Reality Kit is Apple's render. You have to use that to render in sort of in space. But there is a workaround. I mean, you can go full screen where you control everything. We've tried that. And then you can also render into a layer and do your own thing. And that's what we're doing with some of these interiors where you download a light field. And that is effectively something that is, again, it's like if Octane rendered an image or a stereo image, that's understandable even in 360. This is a full volume or cube that is, it's not even a 3D texture. It's actually, it has pieces of the geometry in there. But when you look through it, all the lighting's in place. You can even do post effects with it. And by the way, one of the features in Octane 2024 is that you're going to be able to generate these and load them back in. And they're basically they're emissive textures, but they're pre-computing all the light. So it's super fast. My goal is that you could probably run Octane live in the Vision Pro, not just in a window, but probably in full screen mode and move around the scene with very little noise once the pre-computation phase is done. So there's a lot of stuff there. The spatial experiences that we have, I mean, the app that we put out is basically all of the pieces that play stuff back on the Vision Pro will also be in Octane X. And believe it or not, the app, which is called the archive, it's not just the Roddenberry archive. It can load other things. We've got some Batman stuff we did 10 years ago. There's a button that says load your own assets, which come right out of Octane. But ultimately, you'll be able to load an Orbex in this thing, and it'll be able to pull that down, and you'll be able to work with that. And so there'll be a pretty tight loop between Octane, the creation tool, sending things to the render network, and everything in that app, by the way, was done in the render network. There's like any baking, all this crazy spatial videos. I mean, heck, even the 3 Star Trek videos, those concept videos we did, all rendered on render. And there'd be no way. Like, I mean, I think people were looking at the stats of render, it was going up. Not to scare people, but if you're going to render at 16K for a minute, which is what some of those orbits are, it's like 10K render on the render network, So it's something that really is, I think if it weren't for the render network, some of these spatial experiences would be harder to build or tap onto. But, it's for us, it's just about building that pipeline. And I think the Star Trek app, the archive app, is a great way of showing how those things work. And it is fun to see the Enterprise and make it life size or make it the size it is in the Smithsonian. There's so much more to be done. I mean, we're just starting. We have a lot more content that we could be adding, but currently the app, there's like 100 different, interiors and items. I mean, like I think like Disney ships with 4, and the Max app has one Game of Thrones thing. So if once you go through those 5, there's 90 something else in the Star Trek app that are just beautiful spatial experiences, all organized, all within info box. It's like going through a museum, really.
Mm-hmm.
Is it only
very proud of that work? I think.
Is it only staying on the Apple Vision Pro, or is there any thoughts of bringing it over to other VR headsets?
I think that no, there always has been. I think when we said it was exclusive and we did put that in there, it's because a 16K video just isn't going to play on the Quest 3,
right?
And
sure.
the spatial light field render isn't going to render on something less than probably an M2. So those are the things that are unique to the Vision Pro. I mean, everything else you can go on the web and you can open up in the Quest. There's an internet browser and everything's online, right? So you can go to roddenberry.x.io. Everything's there. You can even have a panorama. We even added a button so 3GS boots up in WebXR and you can see the panel. But it looks like, can't even compare that to what you can get on the Vision Pro. And the assets and the rendering pipeline of the Vision Pro are unique to the device. So we either were like, well, we do sort of middling content that kind of works well on the Quest, beyond what you can kind of already do in the WebXR experience, the website piece, which is always there, or do we go full in and develop stuff that, frankly, at a quality of fidelity that has not been seen before for the Vision Pro, and the latter was what made sense to do in this case. But it's not an exclusive thing in the sense that if we wanted to adjust on that platform, we probably wouldn't have done something that runs on the web and runs everywhere. And that's the thing. If you want to see the content, all of it's available on the web online. In
looking
2D
at it
form,
right now, that's cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can literally go into Quark Sport, Deep Space Nine, go into Quark Sport, just pull everything off the shelf. It's hours of Star Trek content that's there. So it's pretty crazy.
So I guess I haven't seen any video of this. I know that there's objects and you can like blow them up and do all. Where can I find the video?
Yeah.
Is it on the website?
It's on the website. If you even go to the to roddenberry.xi.io, right? And you can look at blogs, look at videos. I would do that. I would also just look at I think it pinned on the Otoy Twitter right now are a bunch of images, videos, and links. So if you just do @Otoy on X. On X, I keep keep forgetting it's not called Twitter anymore. You can see stuff there, but even just going to the web portal. I mean, if you're a Star Trek fan and you're interested in this, see the 2D version. But then, under the top right, there's a menu called Blogs. The first blog entry is a whole deep dive on what's possible on the Vision Pro. There's videos. It shows everything. So I absolutely recommend people check it out.
And that's on the.
Oh, cool.
Okay, I see. Okay. Oh, this is great. Yeah, I'm going to try and bring this up here so people can see. Because I'm trying to look at it in my head. I saw an article yesterday, but it had only an audio thing on it. Let me go to this here. So this is great. So you put it in your
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, this is your office. I recognize this.
That is my office. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's and you can scale it, right? I mean, and you can see it's casting a shadow on the ground, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
If you go into a dark room, the lights on the Enterprise glow and turn on, so it's like it picks up the lighting around you. And you have about 1 million polygon budget if you're doing it this way on the in Reality Kit. And if you need to go beyond that, that's when we have to go into light fields or something more exotic to get you to 5 million, whatever, unlimited, right? I mean, but what's interesting is I can imagine a future version of this device with an M3, right? This ships with an M2. I think they just didn't have time to squeeze an M3 in it. With ray tracing hardware, that could be really huge. Yeah, those are just a sampling of. I mean, you can see the inside of all the different ships, Voyager, Deep Space Nine. It's interactive.
Yeah.
Like you can launch a shuttlecraft that goes outside of the thing, and this is showing. So this is that 1 meter cube is in the middle, but it doesn't mean you can't figure out what's around that, and that's with a button that just adds those extra pieces. And that's me with my hand, just like moving the cube around. I can make it big. I can go inside of it. So those are, I think, and those range from a few hundred megabytes to gigabytes, depending on how big you want that scene to be. But if you're running it at 4K 90, which is what this demands, and you want to have perfect reflections, you want to have, millions or even tens or hundreds of millions of triangles in a scene. Light field baking, it's a solution, and that can be loaded back into Octane as well, where there's no noise. It's just one emissive texture, and and you can add other stuff. You can still do path tracing, but it's a neat hack, and so the idea is that the generation of those is something, of course, you can do locally, but you can also send it to render, get back the data, put it right back in your scene, use it for Vision Pro, all of that. And by the way, USVZ export is also something we've been working on, which would be useful not just on Vision Pro, but for ARKit on iPhone and iPad.
That was gonna be my
cool.
question, like, because I didn't know like how immersive you could get with it. Like, can you also, like, if you're inside the bridge, can you like grab it and like scale it down, and all of a sudden you're on the outside, or is that a separate model? Are these separate models? Like, how does that work?
So I think the one that's the one where you're walking through the bridge and it's like you can pick up those assets and it's fully interactive. That one is actually running on a server, and all those layers are there. But that's just one modality. That's like you want to go walk on the bridge. If you want to download a 3D model of the bridge and render it in the glasses locally, that's where we have this light field. And that light field doesn't have to be 1 meter cube. That's just the equivalent of 1K by 1K, right? You can render an 8K by 4. You can render multiple cubes. You pull those down, and then you can collectively shrink or scale them, put them over your head and walk through them. All of that's possible. And there are some things you can be doing on top of that. They can have some interactivity, but they're generally kind of pre-baked to some degree. The 3D models of the ships are just, those are basically million polygon models that we basically just tuned and exported out of Octane to run in Reality Kit. And there is some baking that's going on there, but it's nothing like the light field baking where it's like reflections are baked in and things like that. Those are the two types of things you can pull in locally. And then, of course, light stage scans, like we scanned in Dr. Spock and other characters, and those can be pulled down and even animated. Those are coming. That's something like, nice. February 2nd came up really fast, and we didn't have a huge amount of lead time on it. But at this point, every single interior that the Octane can render, everything that can be a light field, you do get a preview of it as a beautiful stereo panorama. That's the stuff we were doing for the Quest or the Gear VR back in 2014 with John Carmack. Still has a function in stereo rendering, and you can even do animations and orbits of those, which we do support in the app, and those look beautiful. Those are like 360 spatial videos, but they're not the same as like walking through this thing and having it be expandable. That truly is a holographic format. It's pretty great. So exporting and generating those things are just going to be tools and extensions that we have on top of what we currently support, like with this stereo panoramic camera and the like. But the good news is the authoring of those things can be done on the Vision Pro live. That's the idea with having the Octane iPad app, and even now this new Vision Pro Archive app, viewer app, basically. Be able to view and generate and run those things. And even Octane itself, the viewport itself will be floating. It'll have alpha and it'll be stereo. Even if you're not doing anything fancy, you're just seeing that live as you're doing changes. Very cool.
That'd be sweet. I've watched stuff on the archive itself. Like, it's incredible how much detail there is, and how
it's
much
incredible.
Like, even when it comes down to like different versions of the same specific bridge, but over different years from different movies and all of that. How in the world do you sort through all of this information? I'm sure you've got crazy amounts of data and documents and all
there
that.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I will say there's a team that was put together initially with an endowment from Roddenberry. Roddenberry, my best friend, Gene Roddenberry is his dad. That's why it's the Roddenberry Archive. So he invested in Otoy years ago, and it was not an insignificant investment. So that's what got this started. And with that, we started with the people that knew Star Trek best, Mike and Denise Okuda. They literally were the ones that were part of overseeing the Smithsonian restoration of the 11-foot Enterprise that's now in the museum. They wrote the Star Trek Encyclopedia. They knew everybody. They've been working on the shows for decades. So they're the ones that really do lead this project. I help. I consider myself like an editor of sorts, or help. I help sort of guide the thing. But we have a lot of artists. We hire a lot of artists also from the community that have either worked in the show or that are good enough to be part of this larger group. And the depth of, and the weekly meetings, that go through everything. Like, they're recorded. We basically have transcripts of everything, so everybody can see in the future how all this thing was put together, where the sources come from. I guess we started them long before there were LLMs, but now an LLM can sort of probably read through it and tell you what date things were done on. But it's all there, and we've done every Enterprise bridge. We've now done almost every TV show. Deep Space Nine, that space station is pretty huge and complicated. That's in the archive now. And we can keep going. And there's even, there's even this concept of like a Roddenberry adjacent properties, right? If you look at the archive app, there's interviews with George Lucas, my friend Rod, talking about how Star Wars and Star Trek overlap, or Stan Lee. Where these things go, I want to cover everything that sort of is in that sort of pop culture universe, and Star Trek was a great place to begin. But there's so much more. But that level of detail is something that people appreciate. I have to say, I mean, it's not me. I'm just organizing that piece, but it's incredible. The team's incredible, and I've never seen work like this ever. And I think even Star Trek fans who are very, rightly so, they're very picky about things. I mean, they're in the 4 days since we relaunched the experience. And they're looking underneath, like, it's Spock's bed and looking through his medicine cabinet or whatever it is, and like, oh, this is purple, or like, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's all there. It's exactly what you would want it to be in. It's every version of Star Trek. The newest stuff from Strange New Worlds season 2 is in there. They're filming season 3 now. Prodigy, we got the Prodigy ship in there, which is that moved to Netflix. So there's all 10 Star Trek TV shows, all 13 Star Trek movies, and pretty much a ton of Star Trek novels and books, which are 40% of the Star Trek story are in that literary universe. Like, that's part of the project as well.
I had
doing these little shorts. Yeah.
I had the Star Trek technical manuals as a kid. I loved those.
Yeah.
Did you ever?
Yeah, me too.
I loved the technical manuals. It was just a book.
The people that wrote them work on this project.
Yeah.
Laura Johnson wrote Mission Shots Guide to the Enterprise. Was helping us figure out every single room on the actual motion picture Enterprise, because she'd be the one that would know it, and it's great. I mean, those and of course all the Star Trek encyclopedias, all those books and greatly detailed. The chronology of Star Trek, all written by the Yakutas, that are the heart and soul of this project. So it's all there. If you ever love those books, this is for you. Yeah.
I love that there's the sounds too, like, of each bridge.
Oh yeah.
And so, like, I mean, I could see just putting this on and letting it, like, play in the background while you're working. Feeling like...
there is one of the things that I think would be fun is if people have different backgrounds. I mean, I remember when the Yakutas and I first started doing stuff, they had the Zoom background with the Enterprise. And I'm like, give it a couple of years, and granted, the personas on Apple Vision Pro, they're not, like, totally real looking. But if you do take a FaceTime call, you do something in there, you can load in, you can share environments, you can do different things. And the idea would be that you could take a Zoom call from the bridge of the Enterprise, and that could be kind of cool. So
yeah. And have you seen? There's I don't know how much you get on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. There's a guy that cuts.
Not much.
He has like all the outtakes from Next Generation, right? And he cuts them into the existing show where they would have been. So it's like a real serious scene, and all of a sudden you see him start, doing something funny or run into a door, high five.
I love that.
It's so great. I'll have to send you one. And we've got like I've seen multiple people in the chat here, conspiracy theories that you actually created Bitcoin.
No.
Multiple times. It's really funny.
No. Although I'm very proud of the fact that the whole idea for Render predates Bitcoin. I mean, that feels like, even though there's a patent from 2009, that idea, I remember talking to the patent from 2004, 20 years ago. I was thinking about setting it home and all the TPUs that were out there even in those years. So no, it's been a 20-year journey to get Render to the point where it's at. But no, Bitcoin was nothing to do with that. Sorry.
So he says, everybody.
So I say.
You would say that. Any updates, because we always do this, any updates on the real world holodeck?
Yeah.
Yes. So my good friend and colleague, John Carafin. I don't know if this happened since we last spoke, but Otoy invested in Lifestyle Lab.
We did know that. I think so.
We did do that. So I literally put skin in the game. I think that towards the end of this year, early 2025, you'll start to see those panels ship. Also, Bill Gates is a fan. Bill Gates goes there and takes selfies there and puts on Instagram. So I think he's seen some of the stuff that we built for that thing when he's visited. So it's coming. I mean, it's a hard project. It's also something that I think, like anything at this scale, is going to start with a very high end theme parks and things like that. I think the MSG sphere, right? It is coming, and I think that the end of this year, early next year, will probably there'll be tangible results that consumers will be able to see for the first time. Yeah. And I have promised, my people that I'll try to get him some panels for his work, because obviously the stuff he's doing, with these physical LED panels, I mean, they would be transformed by having that. And I've talked to John about it, and I've connected them for sure. I'd love to see something like that happen. My goal, of course, is to be able to afford the holodeck and build it into, I guess, my garage here.
Yeah.
Right now, the cost is exorbitant, and there's not enough panels. But that's it's
Yeah,
coming.
yeah, I can imagine Beeple's artwork. Like those big box displays he's doing. If they had those
Yeah.
panels, that would be amazing. That'd be so cool.
Yeah.
Has the power consumption that it needed previously, like I feel like
It's gone
years
down.
ago when we
It's gone down.
talked, yeah,
It was
I like
16 A6000. It's going down to like 4.
oh, that's
GPUs or
so
whatever. And
nice.
It's getting there.
It's it's getting there. So the idea is that it's going to be ultimately my understanding and expectation would be that it's not too different than installing the Samsung video wall, which is also a very expensive piece of kit. But you can rent it and you can build it, and it exists, and it can be expanded to any size. So the more panels you have, the bigger the hologram, the further in and out it can go of the volume, and that's how they're doing it. And I think they're focusing on these 18-inch panels. They've been smaller ones. There've been a couple of other form factors, but that one is the one that's going to be the go-to-market one. And it's definitely going to be ready this year, and I assume that there'll be some things that you'll be able to touch. And certainly, I would imagine there'll also be precedents. And remember, when they first launched the, it showed people the panels at all. They invited seen it. They invited people over to show them the smaller panel. When the bigger one's ready, there'll be something similar. And I've come up and seen it a bunch of times. It's been awesome. And I've seen the Roddenberry Archive stuff on the holographic panel. It's crazy.
Oh, that's cool.
Crazy to see that.
That's pretty meta.
Enterprise characters from the 2 teasers we did. So it's no joke that this stuff that we're doing for the archive is ultimately, you'll experience it on the holodeck, and that's a theme that's in Star Trek itself. I mean, the whole some of the thing I do in my talks now is are we living in a simulated reality? The holodeck as a story construct, right? Is not the craziest idea that you're seeing all of Star Trek. The captain's log are really just it's simulating. You're playing back the stories that happen in this future history. So.
Yeah. What would be the first thing if you had the holodeck right now? What would be the first thing? What kind of a scene would you first load into it?
Oh, I would post. I know exactly what I would do. I used to live in the suburbs of Paris in the countryside, and it's beautiful. It doesn't exist anymore. They built a million buildings over it. But I would go. That's my happy place. I would definitely boot that up and just walk around. That neighborhood that as it used to be, it's just gorgeous. I still go back there. It just doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
And things like that. I mean, things that have things on Earth that have a beautiful, connection to your life, or they're just beautiful, period. I mean, I think that spaces like that would be my first thing. From an emotional connection perspective, there would be that. But then, of course, just like we're doing with the Vision Pro, I mean, you look at the 4 things Disney built, and you look at the things we're building with it. Go on the Enterprise, go on the Tandem, go into Tony Stark's headquarters or the Monsters Inc. thing. I mean, it's not hard to imagine the things that you might want to visit. And frankly, they build these things in Disneyland and in theme parks. I mean, on a sort of a media landscape perspective, but the personal things that, especially if you're able to capture things with such high fidelity now, with Nurse, with Gaussian spots. I mean, being able to clean that up and have memories recreated spatially that you can experience without glasses.
Yeah.
I think that would be pretty great.
You go have a glass of wine at Picard's Vineyard.
Yeah. Well, that is in California. It's not in France. At one point, we're going to go up, we will go up there and rebuild that and scan that in. We're going to be doing landscapes and other things. I mean, it's unending, the Roddenberry Archive. So, Picard's Vineyard, the very first thing you see in the holodeck and Encounter at Farpoint, those are all on the list of environments we want to bring in for people to experience.
Sweet. Ooh, have we covered everything? Is there anything we haven't covered today?
I think so.
I mean, I think we covered a lot.
We did.
We covered a lot.
Ooh, is Jules thinking to bring Otoy to the market as a public company? That's an interesting question.
Maybe. I mean, right now, they're very happy running as a private company. We're doing really well. It's something that is always an option, but it's not a near-term thing. So that's my honest answer.
And a wild Paul Babb appears. He said, "Did someone say wine?"
Oh, hey, Paul.
That's funny.
Yeah, Paul's gonna have to come hang out in the vineyard. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness! All right, we're gonna take a quick break here for a little advertisement. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Sashia Dumont. I'm a writer, actor, and filmmaker.
Hi, my name is Paul Robinson. I'm a director, DP, and filmmaker. We are the creators and hosts of the Go Gorilla Filmcast, an online source for all things indie film.
We are a husband and wife film team and co-owners of Send 3 Productions, and we started this podcast for filmmakers like ourselves who were producing on micro budgets with skeleton crews.
Go Gorilla is a weekly podcast that features various talents in TV, film, and web series productions.
We've interviewed filmmaker powerhouses like Kestrin Pantera,
Richard Raymond,
Alex Ferrari,
Cassandra Ebner,
and Ryan Connolly. Amazing actors like Hannah Ward,
Lou Taylor Pucci,
Chris Wataski,
and Eileen Gruba,
groundbreaking cinematographers like Jody Lee Lipes,
and Jessica Lee Gagné, and many more.
We also offer weekly reviews of our favorite films and shows, which vary from low-budget first-time filmmakers to A-listers and everyone in between. Go Gorilla is proud to announce that we have officially joined the Mograph Podcast Network.
So if you love filmmaking as much as we do,
Tune in every Sunday for a new episode of the Go Gorilla Filmcast, your source for all things indie film. Now available on the Mograph Podcast Network.
Oh,
Jules,
my
thank you so
goodness.
much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
This is
it's
such a
always
pleasure.
a pleasure to have you on. We appreciate your time
Likewise.
so much, and it is
Yes.
it's so there's so much information that we get, and it so much value we get out of having you on the show. So we appreciate it so much.
I love being here. Anytime, guys. Anytime.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the show again on like half speed to like reabsorb the information. There's always so much. There's always so much. Are you planning on going to any events that are coming up soon that we might might see you at? If any, are you, like NAB or any of those things? I know you're still in like
might.
baby
I mean,
mode, but
Yeah, I think the next event for sure that I'm committed to is the GTC, which is end of March,
Cool.
in person after 5 years. So I'll be there. But yeah, I mean, I'll if I'm going anywhere else, I'll be sure to share it with you guys, post it on social media as well.
Awesome.
awesome.
Very cool.
Thanks again. Make sure you check us out at mograph.com, mograph.com/TV. Make sure you just put that on after the show and watch a little something. It's on all the time. Matt's got it on right now. Follow us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. We're broadcasting now live on on TikTok, and we hope to be doing some short form videos and things like that as well this year. So that'll be fun. And that's about it, I guess, huh? Are we done? All right.
Yep.
All right. Until next time, I'm
Awesome.
Dave.
And I'm Matt.
Have a good one.
I'm Jules.
Later.
Bye.
Thank you.
Later,
There you
yo.
go.
Bye bye.
It's pretty good, I guess. Introducing Mograph TV from Mograph.com, a free motion graphics and animation channel streaming your favorite content and favorite artists 24/7. Mograph TV features motion graphics tutorials, talks, tips, inspiration, and replays of popular live shows. We offer something for all levels of designer, from introductory tutorials to high-level breakdowns and everything in between.
That track looks great to me.
Mograph TV features software like Cinema 4D, After Effects, Unreal Engine,
What up?
third-party plugins, and other 2D and 3D software. We also feature live motion events, short-form clips, crypto art, and even a little photo and video editing. Learn from the people that inspire you most, and stay up to date on all the latest industry news, announcements, and community events. You'll also see exclusive offers only available by watching. With 3 8-hour blocks each day, you'll be sure to catch everything, no matter what your time zone. Keep it on as a companion to your workday and learn something new. Meet a friend, watch a demo, catch a classic tutorial, or even find new inspiration.
That's a British word?
A lot of things are British words.
Yes, good luck with all your projects.
Mograph TV, television for the design community 24/7.